I'm sure you've gone through the statement of the Bank of Ghana, the issue as against the issues raised by the minority. Does the statement respond to the issues that have been raised?
Good morning, Sana, and good morning to all your cherished listeners. In a certain sense, that statement is, if you like, the unapologetic penance of a chronic sinner. I'm not sure what the objective of the statement was, but I do not think that it sufficiently addresses the concerns that the NDC has raised. And it's for a couple of reasons. Because if you go through the statement, the NDC's main focus here is the recklessness with which our, if you like, our central bank has been managed, the unlawfulness with which its operations have been shrouded, in the sense that, as we all know, central bank should, by our law, by our own Ghanaian law, and this is not unique to us, it is what you call prudential management rules, to ensure that the government of Ghana is not left unhinged to do damage to itself. You know, it's almost like the same rules that the same Bank of Ghana and our financial authorities issue out to various commercial banks. If somebody comes to you and they haven't got good collateral, do not lend, because if you lend, risks are they won't be able to pay back. You know, and so the law basically says that you shouldn't be lending to government beyond 5% of their previous revenue. So previous year's revenue. So if your previous year's revenue is 100 cedis and you go to them to lend, to lend to you, then they shouldn't be giving you anything beyond 5 cedis. And that law has been very, very clear. And what is interesting is that they have lent to government by a huge margin, well in excess of that. Additionally, if they are to do this, they should be reporting to Parliament, which is the sovereign state's legislature. They have again ignored that. So they broke a couple of rules. And if you look at the net impact, it contributed to the massive debt overhang. You know, when you have a situation where you are lending heavily to a government that is sinking, when the option should have been for them to cut expenditure, you were basically printing money for them. And we ended up in a very, very deep fiscal position, which then meant that you had to what? Turn around and, as they would say, lose 50% of that. Because if you look at Bank of Ghana's exposure, it wasn't just to, they themselves have confirmed in their document, it wasn't just to the money printing that they were engaging in. It was to cocoa bills, it was to other liabilities. And they are now confessing that if they had not taken this 50% haircut, in other words, if they had not taken a hit of close to 50 billion, we would not have been able to secure the IMF debt package. You know, and so I think that the NDC's position is very, very solid from prudential management perspective, because we have a central bank that is meant to ensure that they engage in prudential management of our finances. They are meant to ensure that there's transparency in the governance of our banking and financial sector. And they have strongly enforced this on other commercial banks that were not even in half the terrible position that they have put themselves in. And so it becomes really, really controversial when it's almost like the priest that you go to absolve you of your sins, to confess and absolve you of your sins, is himself a very chronic sinner, and he makes excuses for his sins, but then says that you, the member of the if you like, the laity that comes there for sins, you should be punished accordingly, but he should be left free of charge. You know, so from that angle, I think that the NDC has a very, very, very solid ground on it. But for me, one of the other very interesting angles is when you read the statement of the Bank of Ghana, it appears that there are things that the Bank of Ghana is saying here, right? That government of Ghana has always denied. If you ask government of Ghana, how did we get to this? They go ahead and start quoting Ukraine, Russia war. They start quoting COVID war. But at least if there is any ray of light in the Bank of Ghana's statement, if you look at paragraph 3 of that Bank of Ghana statement, it is very, very clear, and I'll read it so that you see that this is the proper confession coming. This is part of the exact reason we're where we are and not Ukraine, Russia. What they basically say, and it's a continuation from paragraph 2, where in paragraph 2, it says that there was a clear mismatch between revenue inflows and expenditure financed in 2020. In fact, before that, they say that it is important to put Bank of Ghana's 2022 financial results in proper context with a clear statement of the problems that Ghana faced and the chronology of Ghana's events in Ghana since 2019. This is the first sentence of the second paragraph of their statement. So they themselves have been clear that Ghana's problem started since 2019, and they diagnosed it as a clear mismatch between revenue inflows and expenditure that was financed. Then they go ahead in paragraph 3 to say, as a result, sovereign spreads on Ghana's bonds widened, signaling investor dissatisfaction with the stance of fiscal policy. So basically, what they are saying here is that it is our reckless fiscal policy. And what is fiscal policy? Well, fiscal policy is basically your approach or your strategy for raising revenue and spending it. So if you are raising more than you are spending, you will have a surplus. So if your budget, which is effectively your main fiscal policy tool, if your budget says, I'm going to raise 100 cedis, I'm going to spend 50 cedis, you have a surplus for 50. So people know that you are going to be what? A responsible person, because you are spending less than what you are raising. You are cutting your coat according to your cloth. They will lend to you. What Bank of Ghana is confessing here is that the government of Ghana was raising less than they were spending. They were creating a fiscal imbalance based on their policy of we raise 100 but we're spending 150. So they were going to put themselves in debt. And they claim this, they take this back all the way to 2019. And they continue that the budget for 2022, which was read in 2021, failed to address the fiscal concerns as the budget was even more expansionary. And expansionary, you have got two types of budgets. Basically, an expansionary budget is a budget that seeks to spend more, right, than it has reached. So it will always lead to a fiscal deficit. Whereas a contractionary budget is one that seeks to raise more than it spends. So if you raise 100 cedis and you spend 50 cedis, you are contracting the fiscal space. And basically, you are spending less than you raise, which means you are creating surpluses that would allow you to reduce your debt. You are contracting, you are reducing the amount of debt. The reverse is if you engage in expansionary fiscal policy, it means that you want to stimulate demand in the economy. So you are spending more than you are actually earning. So you are leading to deficits, and that can lead to a serious debt overhang. And what the Bank of Ghana is confessing here is that the 2022 budget was very expansionary in nature and failed to address the fiscal policy concerns of the investors that stopped buying our bonds. And it proceeds to say that it was expansionary by about 23% with a raft of revenue measures to raise finances. As a result, the credit rating agencies further downgraded Ghana's sovereign debt rating, which blocked Ghana's access to international capital market to borrowing. And it says then in paragraph 4, it then says this triggered a liquidity crisis spilling over into the balance of payment crisis. External and domestic debt, domestic payments needed to be made, and the domestic auctions were failing. And the Bank of Ghana had to step in to arrest a major economic and social crisis. So basically, what they have confessed to is that our government have been reckless in how they have been raising and spending money. They have been spending more money than they could raise since 2019. And that led to the situation where our credit agencies did not see us as credit worthy. Because my brother, if somebody is coming to you to borrow money and you see they are always driving flash Ferrari cars, but they have no source of income, why will you give your money? Because you are putting your money down into that bottomless pit. And the credit agencies continuously downgraded and walked away from our debt. And yet we continue raising bonds that we were wasting away. And the way these bonds are, when central bank is underwriting these, is basically saying that I'm issuing it on your behalf. If nobody buys it, I will buy. And so central bank was effectively printing a lot of money for government through this route, through overdraft, through all these. And that led to the huge, almost 80 billion in total that they had offloaded to the Bank of Ghana between 2021 and 2022. Now, for me, the most important thing, you see, they even confess that in the space of 2 months, the Bank of Ghana lost $500 million in reserves. And this was all down to what? Raise overdraft to government and a deterioration in our if you like, our currency positions. Why is it then not surprising that in order to get our domestic debt exchange program to secure the IMF, the entire domestic debt exchange program, Bank of Ghana has now confessed, was a failure. And the only way it could succeed was if the Bank of Ghana was to take a 50% haircut to the debt that it had issued to government between 2021 and 2022. So, my brother, the sad part of it is that even though we all agree that they shouldn't have done what they have done, that letter in seeking to address the concerns of the minority has actually ended up exposing government and setting out the true state of what happened. And so this 60 billion CD loss that we are looking at, that's the equivalent of about $6 billion. If you take the CD is between 10 to 11 CDs. This Bank of Ghana has just lost $6 billion. Meanwhile, we went to where? We went to IMF to collect half of that, which is $3 billion. And what does that mean? The Bank of Ghana is fully owned by government of Ghana. And so when those days when President Mahama was making profits of about 700 million, and it was all coming back to the government of Ghana coffers, because Bank of Ghana, just like Cocoa Board, just like the state institutions, are fully owned by government of Ghana. And so when they make a profit, government of Ghana the profit will be paid to the government of Ghana, which means we can use that to build more schools, build more boreholes, build more hospitals, or in other ways, use that to pay our debts. So assume that Bank of Ghana had made profits of 700 million this year, just like in 2016. It would have helped us pay off some of this huge debt we have. But because government engaged in reckless fiscal and financial policies and used the Bank of Ghana to illegally borrow monies from them, which they then turn around, they couldn't pay, they've had to now cut it off. All these 60 billion losses, guess where they are coming to? They are going back to government's balance sheet because we own Bank of Ghana. So Bank of Ghana is a loss-making entity. We are suffering the effects of it.
Now go back to that again, because the Bank of Ghana says these losses have little implication for the operations for its operations. So, but you're saying these losses will come back to affect us?
Oh, absolutely, Sana. And we put it simple. Just see, Sana, if you own Bank of Ghana, if Bank of Ghana was your company, anytime they make a profit, they will share it as dividends to you. And anytime they make a loss, of course, you will lose because that will be whittling away your capital because you own the bank. And so you have what you call equity in it, the owner's capital in it. And anytime they make a profit, which is the difference between the revenue they get and then the losses, the cost that they incur, that difference in profit automatically will come to you. Either you draw it down as dividends or it will increase the amount that you have. So if you have, say, 1 billion cedis as your total owner's equity in Bank of Ghana, and at the end of the year, Bank of Ghana makes another 1 billion in profit, that profit will go on to what you call your equity line, which is what the owner's share of ownership of the company. And therefore, your total ownership value will increase from 1 billion to 2 billion because they made another profit. If on the reverse, your total ownership or the total money you have put in there, that's what you call equity, is 1 billion, and they make a loss of 1 billion, that loss of 1 billion will reduce the amount you own there to zero because profits and losses are eventually traced to the owner of the company. And this is what it means. And so in 2016, when President Mahama made 700 million Ghana cedis for Bank of Ghana, part of that money, you see, part of the profits that the Bank of Ghana owned is what President Mahama used to get them to build the Bank of Ghana hospital. So if you look at it from that angle, We say government built the hospital, which is correct because government owns Bank of Ghana. And therefore, when Bank of Ghana makes profit, government can choose to say, give us that money, let us use it to go and buy chinchinga and share to every Ghanaian. Or give that money and use it to build a hospital, or use that money to go and build a clinic or go and build a school somewhere. On the reverse case, when equity is involved, when Bank of Ghana makes losses, those losses come back to government of Ghana. And this is why, because of the huge losses we have made, we now have a situation where the Bank of Ghana is in negative equity. Okay. What it means is, Senna, negative equity technically means that we do not own anything. See, the share of ownership we had, if you keep it in simple terms, if you put 10 cedis into the bank, your equity in it is in 10 cedis. When the bank makes profits and shares that another 10 cedis to you, your equity increases to now 20 cedis. Mm-hmm. If on the reverse, the bank makes a loss of 20 cedis and allocates it to you, that 20 cedis will wipe out the 10 cedis that you own, and you will now have a negative one, which means that you now have to pump in more money if the bank needs to do anything. If this was a private company, it will go bust. The only reason it's not gone bust is because, as you know, governments never go bust.
Okay.
And so you will see that at the very bottom of their own statement, they use a very interesting term where they say that technically they cannot be deemed to have gone bankrupt. Why? Because they say they are not commercial banks, and therefore technically central banks cannot be insolvent or cannot be bankrupt. That is correct, because they are underwritten by government. If they were a private company, people would have filed bankruptcy arrangements against them to seize their assets. And so they should not hide behind the technical element to make this gargantuan amount of losses and say, oh, don't worry, everything is fine because we were able to achieve our policy objectives. What are your policy objectives? Price stability is one of the policy objectives. What do I mean by price stability? One of the things that the government, central banks will do is, whenever they see that inflation is getting out of control, then they will increase the policy rate to rein in inflation. In other words, when you policy rate basically dictates how much the commercial banks can lend. So if the Bank of Ghana sets its policy rate at 30%, then commercial banks cannot lend below that. They will now take that policy rate, which is the rate that Bank of Ghana lends to these commercial banks, and they will add their own on top. And the way it then works, it means when they increase the policy rate, it means the rate of lending in the economy will go up, which means that not everybody can afford to borrow at those high rates. So the amount of money that is released in the economy will come down. And when there's less money chasing fewer goods, it means that the prices will come down for the goods to be able to sell. That is how you reduce inflation. Senna, in spite of these humongous losses they have made, this 60 billion that we are looking at has been wiped off their balance sheet, $6 billion. Where is inflation today? Inflation is sitting at what? About 43% now. So it has now handicapped. So they are technically bankrupt in the sense that they do not now have the reserves, they do not have the financial firepower to be able to fight inflation appropriately. And that is why our policy rate is now at 30%, but inflation is still hovering at what? 43%.
Okay.
The other thing you are looking at is their ability to protect the city. They tell you that they spent about $500 million within the space of 2 months trying to fight the city. In other words, releasing more currency. So when there's the shortage of dollars, for example, the price of the dollar will go up. So one of the things the central bank can do is when it sees that the dollar is flying, it will simply release more dollars into the system so that there is more dollars in the system than is needed. And therefore, the reverse of what the price of the dollar will come down. But if your central bank is broke, where is it going to get the dollar to fight the city when the city is under siege? Where is it going to get the money that it needs to release into the economy to release it? So I agree with them that yes, a central bank in the sense cannot be deemed to say it's bankrupt. The creditors will go to court and order for its assets to be liquidated so that they can take their money. But this puts them in a very weak position to be able to achieve their policy mandate.
Okay.
They are not able to now fight inflation. They are not able now to strengthen the city. And the sad part of it is that if they were making some profits, or at least not making losses, it wouldn't have come back to hound government of Ghana. Okay. Here we are now. They have made these serious losses. and it's coming back to Bank of Ghana's balance sheet. This $6 billion that they have lost is coming all the way back to our books. And you are now in a very funny position. Senna, I'm still trying to understand it. You own your own, you have a company, and you now go and borrow money from that company. And that same company you own is now saying that because you have come to borrow money from your own company, you can pay, that company is going to cut or write off the debt. Technically, government is writing off its own debt to itself because government owes this. But if you look at this whole thing in a very, very proper democracy, Governor Addison should have hung his boots by now and resigned in shame. We are hoping that maybe he has a little bit more shame than Oforiatta, because what he has done at the Bank of Ghana is completely reckless. I'm still waiting to see a bank that has made such a humongous amount of losses in the space of 12 months and can still exist. $6 billion, twice the amount that we are going to the IMF for, Senna.
CONRAD, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, my brother.
Mr. CONRAD DUMBAH is a UK-based auditor and financial analyst speaking to us on what the Bank of Ghana is essentially saying. And his opinion is that the Bank of